Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Britain's Parliament is set to vote on the new Brexit deal today. Addressing the House of Commons, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he has achieved the best possible deal and the EU will not delay Brexit any further. PM Johnson said the new deal allows the UK to leave the EU on October the 31st, whole and entire. Britain's opposition Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has rejected the deal, saying it is worse than the previous one. Corbyn said the people should have the final say on Brexit. A Conservative lawmaker, Oliver Letwin, has proposed to defer the deal until all the legislation needed to implement it has been passed by the Parliament. This proposal, which has cross-party support, will be put to a vote at the end of the ongoing debate if selected by Speaker John Bercow. If the amendment is approved by the Parliament, Johnson's deal will not be put to a vote. US President Donald Trump says some European nations are now willing to repatriate ISIS fighters captured in Syria. In a series of tweets, President Trump said the situation in Syria is very fragile and both Turkey and the Kurds want ceasefire. But US Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has attacked Trump's policy in Syria and termed troops withdrawal a nightmare. In a write-up for the Washington Post, he said the combination of a US pullback and escalating Turkish-Kurdish hostilities is a grave mistake. McConnell said this retreat will allow both a Russian and Iranian influence to grow in the region. Earlier, President Trump has called the situation in the region strategically brilliant for the US. US Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad says a political settlement in Afghanistan is in America's national interest. This is the first time Khalilzad has spoken about the Afghan peace process since it broke down last month. In a meeting with newly appointed Military Chief General Mark Milley, Envoy Khalilzad said peace in Afghanistan would safeguard the US from terrorists. He said a political settlement with the Taliban would allow the US to reduce the burden of war and protect 2 decades of progress in Afghanistan. To revive the peace process, Khalilzad and Taliban delegation visited Islamabad earlier this month and met Pakistan's leadership. In a new report, Amnesty International has documented patterns of arrests and beatings by Indian forces in occupied Kashmir. The global rights body said all politicians, activists, and even minors holding dissenting opinions are being arrested. Amnesty International says every Kashmiri detainee interviewed for the report said they had been tortured and subjected to inhumane and degrading treatment. It said that in most cases, the families and lawyers of the detained Kashmiris have no information about their whereabouts or the charges leveled against them. The Indian-imposed clampdown and the communications blackout in the valley has entered its 76th day. Peace talks between the Sudanese government and the rebel groups have resumed in the neighboring South Sudan. Earlier this week, South Sudan's President Salva Kiir volunteered to mediate the dialogue between Khartoum and the rebels from Darfur, Blue Nile, and South Kordofan states. The peace negotiations are backed by regional leaders, including Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni. Government officials and rebel representatives said the discussions would cover political, humanitarian, and security issues. Sudan People's Liberation Movement called the initial agreement on agenda points a great achievement.
On behalf of the SPLM negotiating team, I'd like to explain that what happened today in Pyramid Continental Hotel was a great achievement in the negotiations that started today. The two parties embarked in direct engagement.
On Wednesday, Sudan's peace talks were halted when one of the main rebel groups threatened to pull out, accusing the government forces of bombing its territory. Now moving on to Somalia, where the 20 Al-Shabaab militants have been killed in a military operation in central Hiran province. The operation was conducted after regional administration called for help from Mogadishu. Officials said military operation was carried out between Jaleski and Bulabarde towns. They said 18 guns and other weapons have been seized from the militants. The operation followed several Al-Shabaab attacks on Somali military bases last month. "52 security officers have been injured and 70 people arrested during anti-government protests in Lebanon. The latest unrest was prompted by anger over inflation and new tax proposals, including a fee on WhatsApp voice calls. Riot police in vehicles and on foot rounded up a number of protesters. They fired rubber bullets and tear gas canisters, dispersing demonstrators in Beirut's commercial district. Addressing protesters, Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri blamed his partners in the government for obstructing the reforms. He gave them a 72-hour deadline to stop blocking him, but stopped short of resigning. Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian at an army checkpoint in West Bank. The Palestinian Red Crescent said Israeli soldiers did not allow its ambulances to transport the wounded to the hospital. It said the Palestinian victim later succumbed to the wounds in the custody of Israeli troops. Meanwhile, Palestinian medics said Israeli forces injured 73 Palestinians during weekly protests. In Russia, 16 people have died after a dam collapsed in Siberia. The Russian Emergencies Ministry said 15 others are missing. The ministry said the dam at a gold mine in the Krasnoyarsk region collapsed this morning. It said 2 temporary dormitories at the site were also flooded. Rescue officials said about 270 people were working at the site. They have warned that the death toll may rise. The U.S. has imposed new sanctions on Cuba over its human rights record and support to Venezuela's government. In a statement, the U.S. Commerce Department said it is revoking licenses for the U.S. companies leasing aircraft to Cuban carriers. It said the department will deny future applications for aircraft leases. In a statement, U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross said the Cuban government must cease their destructive behavior at home and abroad. Responding, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel has rejected the decision, terming it as inhumane and unfair. The streets of Barcelona have again been converted into a battlefield as fresh clashes broke out between the protesters and police. Catalan demonstrators are protesting against sentencing of Catalan separatist leaders. Hundreds of protesters have set up barricades on fire and hurled stones at the security forces on the 5th day of the violent clashes in Barcelona. Masked youths blocked the road close to the city's police headquarters, setting large garbage bins on fire. Police have fired rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse the crowd. 128 people have been arrested since the start of the protests. A state of emergency has been declared in the Chilean capital, Santiago, after violent protests. The demonstrations were sparked by a hike in metro ticket prices. Protesters, many of them students, jumped turnstiles and attacked underground stations. The riots left a downtown building engulfed in flames and Santiago's metro system shuttered. Anti-riot police used tear gas and batons against some protesters. President Sebastián Piñera said he would invoke a special state security law to prosecute the criminals responsible for the damage. Piñera said the aim of emergency was to ensure public order and the safety of public and private property. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is up for re-election along with 337 other members of the parliament. Top candidates are campaigning ahead of the country's federal elections scheduled for this Monday. These are country's 43rd elections. More in this report.
In Canada's elections, climate-related policies, housing prices, and slow growth in wages are dominating people's votes. In terms of diversity, these elections have seen the greatest number of 654 female candidates, pointing to a 9% increase from 2015. The top 4 contenders include PM Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh of NDP, Andrew Scheer from Conservative Party, and Elizabeth May from Green Party. But tensions are mounting for Justin Trudeau as opposition parties increase their criticism against his government.
It is unfortunate that the Conservatives keep having to make up attacks against us.
Polls show Trudeau's Liberals are locked in a tie with the opposition Conservatives ahead of the vote and will not capture enough seats for a majority. That would leave them in a weakened position reliant on smaller parties to govern. But opposition's criticism against him is growing.
Families need help now, and that's why we've put forward some urgent priorities that we would work on right away. That includes investments in housing, in healthcare, helping students, tackling cell phone prices, and real and urgent action on fighting the climate crisis.
The result of Monday's election will be largely decided in three key regions: Quebec, the Greater Toronto Area, and the Lower Mainland British Columbia. The last parliament under PM Trudeau was dissolved on 11 September 2019.
Welcome back. In Mexico, a breathtaking view of Popocatépetl volcano with steam coming from its crater was taken from an airplane. Popocatépetl, at the height of 5,426 meters, is the second highest mountain in Mexico. It is the fifth highest in North America. The volcano between the states of Morelos and Puebla had been dormant for decades until its eruption in 1994. Since then, its rumblings have become part of daily life for residents. Spain is one of the world's top exporters of falcons. According to international trade in endangered species data, it exported some 2,800 specimens last year. Most of the Spanish falcons are exported to the Middle East, where rich amateurs buy them for racing or hunting. This report has the details.
For centuries, the art of falconry has been a prestigious tradition within Arab society. Today, most of these formidable predators come from Spain. In upper-class Gulf societies, Spanish hunters are worth a fortune, with buyers sometimes shelling out tens of thousands of euros per bird. Such birds are raised in customized air-conditioned facilities where their trainers come and select the best specimen.
You have customers who buy falcons for the prince's teams, so you have to be careful what you sell and who you sell it to. You can't sell a bird half as good as this one to a prince's team, simply because you close the doors of a market for yourself.
In Spain, falcons also enjoy the advantage of hot and dry climate, in search of a new champion. This provides Spanish breeders a lucrative source of income.
The Electric Cinema in Notting Hill, London has screened a real-life documentary, The Elephant Queen, on African animals. The film delivers drama and emotion on the life of elephant herd across the Kenyan savannah. This report tells you more.
The film follows the story of Athena and her offspring as they face challenges along their trek to the dry season refuge. From intimate shots beneath the feet of the giant beasts to underground footage, the movie leaves viewers in awe of the animals. The magnificent images showed directors Victoria Stone and Mark Diebel's skills to capture amazing moments.
We set out to tell a story that would make the world fall in love with elephants, because we're losing elephants fast and we need to save them.
It took both directors 4 years to make the film.
I mean, the whole idea was it's about making people engage emotionally with elephants, because we feel that unless you react and relate to them on an emotional level, then people aren't going to be concerned about their plight.
The UK's naturalist David Attenborough, Britain's Princess Beatrice, and other celebrities attended the screening of the new film.
The Elephant Queen.
The US sent its first all-female expedition into space. This much-anticipated milestone for NASA was achieved during a relatively routine mission to swap faulty batteries on the station's exterior. More in this report.
US astronauts Christina Koch and Jessica Meir made history as they stepped outside the International Space Station. Both clad in white spacesuits and tied by cords to the station some 408 kilometers above Earth, walked to help condition energy stored from the station's solar panels. US President Donald Trump talked to the astronauts amid mission.
Congratulations, Christina and Jessica, on this historic event. This is truly historic. And you're right now on television all over the world, so don't get nervous.
The mission lasted 5 hours. Friday's spacewalk, formally called extravehicular activities, is in line with the US Space Agency's aim to ramp up inclusivity in space.
We hope that we can provide an inspiration to everybody, not only women, but to everybody that has a dream, that has a big dream, and that is willing to work hard to make that dream come true.
Astronaut Koch is scheduled to complete the longest single space flight by a woman by remaining in orbit around the station until February 2020.
China and the US have said work on a tentative mini-trade deal is going well and they expect it to be signed next month. Speaking in Nanchang, Vice Premier Liu He said China will work with the US to address each other's core concerns on the basis of equality and mutual respect. Liu said that stopping the trade war between China and the US would be good for both sides and the world. Earlier, President Donald Trump also expressed optimism that the deal would be signed when he meets his Chinese counterpart next month.
We're working with China very well. We've done, subject to getting it signed, and I think it will get signed quite easily, hopefully by the summit in Chile, where President Xi and I will both be.
IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva has urged the world's two largest economies to work towards a lasting trade peace. Moving on, Prime Minister Imran Khan says Pakistan's economy is on the mend after a year of fiscal reforms. In a tweet, Khan said Pakistan's current account deficit dipped 80% year-on-year to a 41-month low in September. PM Khan said Pakistan's economy has been better balanced by a 19% year-on-year drop in imports and a corresponding 6% rise in exports. He said Pakistan's position was further strengthened by an 18% rise in remittances by overseas Pakistanis. In the 12 months up to September, Khan said foreign direct investment had jumped by 111%. He said foreign private investment has also skyrocketed by 194%. France, Germany and Italy have joined forces to block the launch of Facebook's digital currency Libra in the European Union. Speaking in Washington, French Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire said the three major EU economies would soon take steps to demonstrate Libra is unwelcome in Europe. Le Maire said the proposed private digital currency poses a danger to national security because it could affect foreign exchange rates. Earlier, the G20 also opposed Facebook's digital currency, saying it carries serious risks of money laundering, fraud and illicit finance. Major financial players have recently backed out of the social media network Libra project. And now the weather situation from around the globe. That's all for now. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.